Hey everyone, and welcome to our Java tutorial on the JVM and how a Java program works. So I have this sort of like charting program called Lucid Chart pulled up just so I can have a little bit of a visual aid here in explaining how all of this happens. So let's just do a little bit of goal setting real quick. And so let's go over our goals for this this tutorial. So what I'd like to do is I want to talk about how does a Java program, let me pull this down a little bit. How does a Java program go from human readable code to machine code? So now, what is human readable code and what's machine code? So human readable code is like the code that you may be familiar with, like being able to read words and seeing our normal numeric alphanumeric characters, certain special characters like curly braces and stuff like that. It's code that, although it's not like English or Spanish, it's its own language and it's readable by humans. Now, this is different from machine code, which is binary code, which is ones and zeros. So it's represented by ones and zeros. So we're going to kind of go over in this video how the Java language goes from something humans can read to something your machine can interpret and run as a program. All right, so let's begin. I'm going to scroll down here just to get a little bit of space. And let's say that we have a program, and this program is going to be called make or create bicycle. Actually, let's call it bicycle creator. Sorry if my typing's a little weird. I just got this new keyboard and I'm still kind of getting used to it. So we'll have a program called bicycle creator .java. And inside of our bicycle creator program, we are going to have a create wheels functionality here. It's a little bigger. And so we'll have a create wheels function. We're going to have a, sorry guys, this program's a little bit awkward to use here. We'll have a create frame function, and we will have a create seat function. Okay, so all of these functions exist in our bicycle creator.java file. So each one of these functions can be in a different Java file. So let's start with create wheels, and let's say that create wheels exists in a different file, and that'll be called wheel creator.java. So we've got our wheel creator file here. And let's say create frames is the same way. So I'm going to try to just highlight both of these, copy and paste it. I'll pull this down here. So we've got our frame creator.java file. And let's say that that has our function create frame. And it's going to be the same for our create seat function over there. Copy and paste, bring it over here. And our create seat function will exist in a seat creator.java file. Cool. So our bicycle creator, I'm going to highlight all these. Actually, I'm going to open that here a little bit. So our bicycle creator.java class has 3 functions in it, and each of those functions exists in another .java class over here. Awesome. So now how do all of these separate files come together and become one program? The answer to that is the Java compiler. So I'm going to pull over actually, you know what? Leave that. I'm going to pull over a different shape. And these shapes aren't really significant to anything. It's just sort of something to distinguish our Java files from the compiler. Here we have our Java compiler. And so what our Java compiler does is it takes in all of these Java files. So we'll start with this one. This goes into the compiler. And this goes into the compiler. Oops. And our frame creator goes into the compiler. And our seat creator goes into the compiler. And so what happens here is that the compiler takes in our .java files and it produces .class files. And so what our .class files look like, we'll just we'll represent them by just a name here. It will look like bicycle creator.class, and that will be the output of our compiler. That's one. It'll also create a wheel creator.class. That'll be another output of our file. It'll create a frame creator.class. That's another output. And we'll have our final seat creator file. .class, and that'll be another output. So what these .class files are is that whereas before with the Java files, those were human readable instructions. Now these .class files are no longer human readable, but they're in an intermediary form called Java bytecode. And so Java bytecode is an instruction set that the Java virtual machine, or the JVM, can interpret. So this is sort of like an intermediary step from going from human readable code all the way to machine code. This is sort of an intermediary class type. And these files are represented by .class extensions. So next we need to see how these .class files get pulled into RAM and converted into machine code by the JVM. Okay, so let's start by getting a little bit more space. We're running out of room here. Let's see if we can make everything a little bit smaller. Decrease the size of this here. And we can kind of ignore that. We know what this is, so let's focus on these guys. Pull these away a little bit so you can see them a little bit easier. Cool. Okay, so let's create our RAM here. So this right here, we will call this RAM. Right, so this is the memory in our computer, random access memory. And inside of RAM, we're going to have the Java Virtual Machine, or the JVM. Cool. Pull this over, and this will be the JVM. So inside of the JVM, we have, I'm going to make RAM a little bit bigger here. So inside of the JVM, we have a class loader, which is a piece of the JVM. The class loader. And what the class loader does is it takes these .class files, and exactly what it sounds like, and it loads them into RAM. So it takes these, it's not letting me do this right now, but it takes these .class files and it pulls them over into our RAM, into RAM. All right, this is becoming a mess. So once the class files are in RAM, they need to be checked for security vulnerabilities. And so the step that does that is called, the step that checks for security vulnerabilities is checking the bytecode for security vulnerabilities. And that step is the bytecode verifier. And that's pretty easy to remember because it's just verifying that the bytecode has no security vulnerabilities. Awesome. So the next step, and the final step that we'll be talking about, is going to be converting the Java bytecode into machine code that can run on your computer. And so that is done by the execution engine. And so all of these steps actually occur during the execution of the program, which is called just-in-time compilation. But the execution engine step is what outputs the machine code that runs on your computer. So just in summary, and it's kind of hard to see here, but we have our bicycle creator.java file. It's the main part of our program. It has a create wheels, create frame, create seat. I know this is all kind of getting jumbled together, but we have a wheel creator that has the create wheels method. We have a frame creator that has the create frame method. And we have the create seat creator that has the create seat method. All of these different files, I'm going to try to move them up here. All of these different files get pulled into the compiler, and the compiler creates these .class files. Each .java file goes through the compiler, and it results in a .class file that contains Java bytecode. Now, all of these .class files, then during the execution of the program, the JVM, which lives on the RAM, or runs on the RAM, the JVM during the class loader portion of the JVM, the class loader pulls in all these .class Java bytecode files. It pulls them into RAM. Then the bytecode verifier looks through our .class bytecode files for security vulnerabilities. If everything passes, the next step, the execution engine then takes these .class Java bytecode files and turns them into machine code that can run on your machine. And so that is how a Java program goes from human readable code into machine code. Okay, so let's go over some definitions really quick. So I have a text editor pulled up here, and let's go over first the JVM. That stands for the Java Virtual Machine, and that is a virtual machine piece of software that runs Java programs. Cool. We also discussed Java bytecode, which is an instruction set for the Java virtual machine. Cool. We talked then about the class loader, which is the part of the JVM that loads the .class files into RAM. And remember, those .class files contain Java bytecode. We also talked about the bytecode verifier, which checks each .class file for security vulnerabilities. And then finally, we talked about the execution engine, which converts Java bytecode, into native machine code that can run on your machine. So we also talked about the compiler, which takes in the .java files and produces .class files. You can add that to this list if you like as well. But these are the main pieces of what we discussed today. I tried to use the visual aid. It was a little bit clunky. I hope it clarified things for you versus making them more difficult. Essentially, all you need to know is that you can have many .java files with human readable code in them. All of those .java files get compiled down by the compiler into a .class file that contains Java bytecode. Java bytecode is an instruction set that the Java virtual machine understands. Inside of the Java virtual machine, we discussed three parts. The first part was the class loader, and the class loader took those .class files that contain Java bytecode and pulled them into our RAM, into our memory. And remember, the JVM is running on RAM and it's executing our program. So those .class files containing the Java bytecode get pulled into RAM. Then the bytecode verifier checks our .class files for security vulnerabilities. If all of it is fine, then it gets passed on to the execution engine. The execution engine is part of the JVM that converts the bytecode into native machine code that can then run the application on our machine. Okay, so I know that's a lot of information, but those are the steps for it. I hope this is clear for you now. We're going to be discussing we're going to do a line-by-line breakdown of how all this stuff works in the next video, and then we'll get into some of the general other concepts such as variables, functions, things like that of the Java language. I hope this has been educational for you guys. Thanks.